talk about the beautiful business of milk today. Yeah, yeah. I got milk. Let's talk about milk. Oh yeah, baby, let's talk about the beautiful business of milk today.
This episode of Got Milk is sponsored by Shunya Agritech, the folks revolutionizing cattle nutrition with hydroponic green fodder. Visit their website at shunya.live for more details or download the Shunya app from Play Store or App Store.
Okay, so sustainable ag in India, huh? Looks like we're going deep on hydroponics this time.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Definitely. And we've got this report from the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, the CEEW,
Right.
about how hydroponics could totally change the game for India's milk and meat.
You know, it's a fascinating report. It actually starts with this fact that's kind of mind-blowing. India has a huge livestock population.
Huge how?
Think about 15%, like 15% of all the livestock on the planet.
Wow, that's a lot of animals.
It is. But here's the thing.
What's that?
They only have about, let me see, 2.2% of the world's land.
Whoa, so all those animals, but not a lot of space to, like, raise them?
Exactly. And that leads to, well, the report calls it a fodder deficit. It's a big reason why, India's milk and meat yields are lower than the global average.
Makes sense, like if they don't have enough to eat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just for green fodder, they're looking at a 32% shortage.
Oh, wow. But so it sounds like this CEEW report, it's not just pointing out a problem, they're saying hydroponics could be the answer.
Totally.
So for anyone listening who's maybe not totally up on their ag tech, hydroponics is basically what? Growing plants without soil.
Exactly. You're using like a nutrient-rich water solution instead. So the plants get everything they need.
So like instead of fields and fields of crops, you could grow fodder vertically.
Exactly. And the report highlights all these like advantages. First off, it's super efficient. Things grow much faster in these systems.
Ah, so you get more fodder faster. Makes sense.
And it means year-round production, which is huge for India. Different regions, different climates, droughts.
Yeah, I was just thinking that with all the different climates in India, it would be so valuable to not be limited by the weather. And I'm guessing this also saves water.
Big time. Way less water compared to, traditional farming.
That's going to be a huge plus, considering all the water challenges in India.
For sure. And it's more climate friendly, too. Less impact.
Okay, this is all sounding great, but the bottom line is, does it actually increase yields? That's got to be the goal, right?
Absolutely. And the report says that, using hydroponic fodder, you can boost yields like milk and meat by 10 to 15% compared to, the conventional ways.
Seriously? 10 to 15%? That's a big jump.
It is. Could make a huge difference for, food security and for all those farmers we talked about.
No kidding. Okay, I got to ask. When we're talking hydroponics here, are we picturing those massive industrial farms?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The report actually makes a distinction. Small-scale hydroponic fodder units, they call them SSHFs, and then large-scale ones, LSHFs.
Okay, so why separate those out? Why is that so important?
Because those small-scale units, they're way more accessible for, individual farmers. Relatively low cost, easy to set up, you don't need a ton of space.
So a farmer with, say, a small herd could have their own little hydroponics setup right there. That's pretty cool. But, I mean, there's got to be challenges, right? Like, getting farmers to actually try new stuff can be tough.
Definitely some challenges. The report talks about needing awareness campaigns, especially, in the local languages, because a lot of farmers might not even know what hydroponics is.
Makes sense. You got to start with the basics. And what about cost? Even if it's cheaper than the big setups, is it really something small farmers can afford?
That's a valid point. That initial cost can be a hurdle.
Yeah.
But the report is all about focusing on the long term. Higher yields, you rely less on outside suppliers, and you're better prepared if the weather goes crazy.
So it's like, you invest up front, but you're setting yourself up for more success in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about those large-scale units? Where do they fit in?
Well, they have huge potential for creating jobs, especially if they're run by, say, community groups or cooperatives. Imagine a village pooling their resources. They've got their own hydroponic farm.
That's kind of a cool idea.
Right. and it helps with food security and gives people jobs.
Okay, so we've talked benefits, challenges, the different scales. Now tell me about the market. How big is this opportunity? Give me the numbers.
All right, get ready, because it's pretty impressive. So they estimate the total market, the TAM, at, wait for it, $3.2 billion.
Whoa.
That's
wow.
if, every single person who could use hydroponics actually did. But of course, that's not realistic right away.
Right. So what's a more realistic number?
They call it the serviceable available market, the SAM, and that's still a huge $2.1 billion. And they think over 4.6 million of those small-scale units could be operating in India. That would be helping like 16 million farmers.
Okay, so this isn't just some small niche thing, it's a real market. But is all that opportunity spread out evenly, or are there, like, hot spots?
Great question. The report actually gets into that. They've got the top 10 states, which account for like 82% of that $2.1 billion SAM.
Okay, hit me with them.
All right, so Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka,
Okay, keeping track.
then Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh,
Got it.
Telangana, and Bihar.
Wow, that's like the whole country. But I guess if you're an entrepreneur, knowing those states would be a good starting point.
Definitely. And they even get more specific, like down to the district level.
Oh, wow, that's granular. Okay, but let's say you're looking at this market. How do you actually make money? What are the, like, business models?
That's where things get interesting. And the report outlines two main approaches: direct sales and what they call fodder as a service.
Okay, so direct sales, that's pretty straightforward, right? Sell the hydroponic units to the farmers. What are the ups and downs there?
Exactly. The farmer owns the equipment, they're in control. But as we said before, that upfront cost can be a problem.
Right. So it's got to be a tough sell, especially if they've never tried it. What about fodder as a service? What does that even mean?
This is a cool one. Imagine like a subscription service, but for fodder. So instead of selling the units, local entrepreneurs would grow the fodder themselves and sell it directly to the farmers.
Oh, so it's like a local, hyper-local fodder production system.
Yeah, kind of like farm to table, but for livestock.
Love it. Okay, so we've got two very different models here. But is there anything in, like, Indian policy that helps these entrepreneurs out? Are there any support systems?
Yeah, the report actually spends a good chunk of time looking at policy. And there are several that could help.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, there's the Fodder and Feed Development Scheme. It tries to boost fodder production through subsidies and training.
So the government is at least aware that they need to improve fodder.
Yeah. And there's also this thing called the Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund. It gives money for setting up livestock infrastructure, including places to produce feed.
Okay, so some help there. But are those specific to hydroponics, or are there any limitations?
That's a good point. And the report says that's one of the gaps. While these policies help, there could be more targeted support for hydroponics, stuff that specifically encourages this tech and addresses the unique challenges.
So, like, there's a foundation, but there's room to build on it and make it even better.
For sure. And that's something anyone who wants to get into this space needs to think about. It's not just about the market or the business plan, but about working with the policy landscape.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. The challenges, the potential, the market, the different ways to approach it. This is shaping up to be a pretty interesting deep dive.
Totally. And we've just scratched the surface.
Can't wait to keep going.
One thing that really struck me about this report,
What's that?
it doesn't just paint this super optimistic picture.
Ah, so it's not all sunshine and hydroponic roses.
Right. They get into the complexities, the potential downsides, things that still need work.
That's good. At least it feels more balanced that way.
Yeah, exactly. And one area they dive into, which I thought was really interesting, is they start looking at specific types of livestock.
Okay, so up to now, we've been talking milk and meat, kind of generally.
Right. But it turns out hydroponic fodder might make more sense for certain animals than others.
Interesting. So in the context of India, are there particular animals where this would be, like, especially helpful?
It seems that way. The report actually breaks it down into, enhancing milk yield, so that's cattle and buffaloes, and then enhancing meat yields, which focuses on sheep and goats.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Those are, like, the big players in India. So what do they say about the potential for those specific animals?
Well, for cattle and buffaloes, the market for hydroponic fodder units is estimated to be, hold on, let me check you out, $1.7 billion.
Whoa, wait, that's almost as big as the whole market we talked about earlier for all livestock.
I know, right. And they think they could deploy something like 3.6 million small-scale units, just for those two.
That's huge. What about the sheep and goats? Is it similar?
A bit smaller, but still pretty big. It's estimated at, hang on, $457.7 million, and the potential is there for over 1 million units.
Okay, so combined, that's still well over $2 billion just for those 4 animals.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even cooler, I think. Start talking about regional nuances.
Regional nuances, huh? What does that mean?
So they found that the demand for this hydroponic fodder, it's way higher in places where there's not a lot of rain, which makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, totally. Water scarcity is a big deal in India, so if you've got a tech that saves water and can grow fodder year-round.
Right, even during droughts. So they're basically saying, hey, entrepreneurs, focus on those water-stressed areas. That's where the need is. That's where you can make the biggest impact.
Love it. Matching the solution to the problem. But how do you actually get the tech to those places?
That's where they get into specifics. They pinpoint certain states, even specific districts, where the market potential is highest.
So they're practically giving you a business plan.
Well, not quite, but it's definitely some helpful guidance. For example, Rajasthan, Karnataka, and Maharashtra, those are interesting because they've got a lot of all 4: cattle, buffaloes, sheep, and goats.
So diverse market, high demand for fodder across the board.
Yep. And get this, 85% of that whole SAM, that serviceable available market, it's in those arid and semi-arid regions.
That really drives home the point about water, doesn't it?
Totally. Okay, but switching gears a bit. We talked about individual farmers, but what about selling larger quantities? Like to groups or organizations? Would that make more sense?
Ooh, that's a good thought. And the report actually does mention that. They talk about targeting like dairy cooperatives and self-help groups.
Interesting. So instead of one farmer at a time, you're supplying fodder to a whole community.
Exactly. They think that could have a much bigger impact both economically and for food security.
Right. It's like a ripple effect. If you get a whole village doing hydroponics, it changes everything.
Totally. And they even point out that in some states like Gujarat and Karnataka, a lot of the milk is already being collected through these dairy cooperatives.
So the infrastructure is already there.
Yep. So for an entrepreneur, partnering with those cooperatives could be a really smart move.
Okay, so understanding the regional stuff is key. But remember how the report talked about financing being a barrier for individual farmers?
Let's dig deeper into those business models. How do they address that?
All right, so with direct sales, the biggest hurdle is that upfront cost, right?
Right. Getting the farmer to invest in the unit itself.
Exactly. Especially for small-scale farmers. They might not have a lot of extra cash lying around.
Exactly. So how do you solve that?
The report says it's all about creative financing and sales strategies.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, for financing, they say, look, partner with banks or lenders who offer loans specifically for agricultural tech. Make it easier for farmers to get those units.
So it's not just about the price of a unit, it's about making the financing work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the sales side, it's about awareness.
Right.
Those campaigns we talked about,
Yeah.
especially in local languages, radio, community meetings, even demos at those agricultural fairs.
It's almost like you're not just selling hydroponics, you're selling the whole idea of it.
Right. You're educating people, showing them how it can change their lives.
Okay, so that's direct sales. What about fodder as a service? How do you make that work?
Well, the key here is building a sustainable business, one that can reliably provide that high-quality fodder.
Right, because now you're the one growing it.
Exactly. And the report talks about those two variations, the subscription and the pay-as-you-go.
Yeah, what are the key things to think about for each one?
So for subscriptions, it's about finding that sweet spot with pricing. And then, of course, the quality has to be there, and you have to deliver on time every time.
So consistency is key. Anything else?
Yeah, they say you got to consider the local stuff, like the rainfall. In areas with decent rainfall, maybe a quarterly subscription makes sense. But in drier places, you might do it every 6 months or even yearly.
So you're tailoring it to the specific needs of the region.
Right. And to make farmers feel more comfortable, they suggest maybe a trial period or offering pay-as-you-go at the beginning.
Smart. Let them try it before they fully commit. What about pay-as-you-go then? What do you have to think about there?
Well, the big thing is inventory. You have to make sure you've got enough fodder to meet demand, even if it fluctuates.
So it's a different kind of logistical challenge.
For sure. But the report has some ideas, like working with local distributors or even doing home delivery.
Oh, like hydroponic fodder delivery. That's convenient.
I know, right? Almost like Uber, but for fodder.
Okay, so we've got those two models, direct sales and fodder as a service. But are there any things that are important no matter which way you go?
Definitely. The report highlights 3: strong partnerships, understanding the value proposition, and identifying the right customers.
Okay, break those down for me. What do they mean by key partners?
They're talking about everyone who needs to be on board. It's not just business partners, but also people in government, investors, research institutions, even NGOs who can advocate for policy changes or get the word out.
So it's about building that whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And the second one, that value proposition, it's about being able to explain why hydroponic fodder is so great.
Remind me again, what are the big selling points?
So higher yields, obviously. That means more money for the farmers.
Mhm.
Then you've got the reduced land and water usage, which is huge for India. Plus, it grows faster, you can do it year-round, and it's better for the environment.
Right, right. So it's like hitting all these major challenges at once.
Exactly. And they even talk about the nutritional benefits, like the animals are healthier, so the milk and meat is better quality.
Ah, so it's not just about quantity, but quality, too.
Yep. Okay, and then that last element, identifying the right customers. Who are you actually targeting?
Well, they break it down by direct sales versus fodder as a service. For direct sales, it's mainly the farmers themselves, but also village-level entrepreneurs and those self-help groups.
So people who are already involved in raising livestock.
Right, and again, they emphasize those drier regions. That's where the need is greatest.
Makes sense. What about fodder as a service then? Who are you selling to there?
It's a bit broader. They talk about self-help groups, farmer-producer organizations, especially in places with a lot of animal husbandry, and NGOs that are already doing work with farmers. So it's less about individual farmers and more about partnering with organizations that already have a presence.
Exactly. They even mention dairy cooperatives, fodder traders, livestock traders, all sorts of groups.
This is making me realize that getting into this market isn't just about having a product to sell. It's about understanding the community, the different players.
Totally. It's about building relationships, working together to make the whole system work.
Okay, so we've covered the key elements of building a business: the partners, the value, the customers. Now, how do you actually get the product out there?
That's where they talk about sales channels, and they recognize that it's different for direct sales versus fodder as a service.
Okay, so what are the main channels for direct sales?
They say you need to do both online and offline.
So a mix of old and new school.
Right. Online, you need a website, of course. And then they suggest those online marketplaces like IndieMart and Big Hot.
Makes sense. Get on those platforms where people are already shopping. But what about offline, especially for those farmers who might not be online all the time?
They say build a network of distributors and retailers who can get those units right to the farmers. And also, those agricultural exhibitions and fairs, those are great places to connect with farmers face-to-face.
Ah, so you have to be present in the physical world, too.
Yeah, exactly. And then building relationships with those influencers like village leaders or farmers who are already respected.
It's like word-of-mouth marketing, but super targeted.
Totally.
Got
Okay,
it.
so that's direct sales. Now, for fodder as a service, it's all about those direct relationships.
Okay, so how do you build those?
Things like door-to-door sales, community meetings, partnering with those organizations we talked about earlier. It's a much more personal approach.
It's about that trust, that long-term connection.
Exactly. And I think that's what this report is really getting at. It's not just about selling a product. It's about changing the way people think about agriculture.
It's that bigger picture, that vision of a more sustainable future.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered a ton in this section. Different animals, regions, the whole business side of things. What are like the big takeaways?
I think the biggest one is that hydroponic fodder really could be a game changer for India. It solves so many problems at once.
Totally. And what else?
There's no magic formula. You got to be flexible, understand the local situation, and find what works best.
Don't be afraid to experiment a little.
Exactly. And then the last thing, the most important thing, is that this is about people. It's about helping farmers, building a better food system.
Beautifully said. Okay, we've talked about so much, from the potential to the challenges to the actual business side. I'm excited to see what else this report has.
Me too. Let's jump into the next section.
You know, I gotta say, my brain's kind of full.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's good. You know, like I'm actually learning something new here. It's exciting.
Right. And this report does such a good job of like opening your mind to what's possible. It's not just like the same old stuff.
Totally. Okay, but is it all just theory? Are there like actual examples of this hydroponic fodder stuff working in the real world?
That's what I love about this report. They actually include these case studies.
Get out.
Yeah, so they're not just talking about ideas, they're showing how it's already happening.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me about some of these cases. What can we learn from them?
All right, so one that really stood out is this company called Hydrogreens Agrotech.
Hydrogreens Agrotech. Okay, what do they do?
They're based in Hyderabad, and they've developed a whole bunch of hydroponic fodder units.
So like different sizes and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Small ones for like individual farmers, and then bigger systems for, commercial operations.
So they've kind of figured out how to scale it.
Yeah, they're definitely one of the leaders. And their story is interesting because it shows how important it is to be flexible.
Okay, how so?
Well, at first they were focused on selling directly to farmers, but they quickly realized that, financing was a big problem. Farmers couldn't always afford those units up front.
Right, we talked about that.
So they got creative. They partnered with a bank to offer special loans just for these hydroponic units.
That's smart.
Yeah. And they didn't stop there. They realized that just giving farmers the tech wasn't enough. So they started doing training programs showing people how to use the units properly.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish.
Right. Teach a man to fish.
Sure.
They're empowering these farmers to succeed in the long run.
I like it. Okay, so Hydrogreens, they're all about direct sales and making the financing work. What about fodder as a service? Any good examples of that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's this one, the Shroff's Foundation Trust in Gujarat. They went the fodder as a service route.
Why'd they go that way?
They saw that farmers in their area were having trouble finding good fodder, reliable and affordable. So they thought, hey, we can solve that.
Almost like a community solution, right?
Totally. Yeah. So they built their own hydroponic fodder production facility and started supplying fodder to villages nearby.
And how does that work, like practically?
It's a subscription. Farmers pay a regular fee and get fresh fodder delivered right to them.
Convenient,
Yeah.
but is it actually cheaper than the old way of doing things?
Yeah, that's what's so cool. They've managed to keep prices down because they're producing a lot of fodder. Economies of scale, they call it.
So they're making a difference for the community and running a successful business. I like that. These case studies are really inspiring, but like, what are the big lessons here? What should people take away from this?
I think the main thing is, hydroponic fodder is more than just a cool idea. It can actually work. It can change things.
Like real practical change.
Right. And then, that second takeaway we talked about before, it's still true. There's no one right way to do this. You got to be flexible, understand the local needs.
So it's like the principles are the same, but how you apply them can be different.
Totally. And then the last takeaway, the one that really matters, this is about people. Helping farmers, building a better food system. It's about more than just making money.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So for all those listeners out there who are like fired up about this, what should they do next?
You'll read the full report. It's from CEEW, and it's got all the details, the data, the case studies, even recommendations for policies.
So it's like a blueprint for anyone who wants to get involved.
Exactly. And there are organizations out there that are supporting this whole movement, like CEEW themselves and Villgro.
Cool. So connect with the experts, learn from the people who are already doing this.
Yep. It feels like we're just at the beginning of something really big here.
It does, doesn't it? And it's pretty awesome to see what people are already doing.
It really is.
Well, I think we've just about covered it all. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And remember, the future of food is something we can all be a part of. Let's make it delicious and sustainable.
I got milk.